This is Radio Works Director of News and Information, Justine Wettschreck, and today I'm talking to Jim Hagedorn, who is the Republican candidate for Congress in Minnesota's 1st District. And I haven't talked to you for a while, so welcome back. It's nice to see
Justine, you. Well, Justine, it's great to be here. I love Nobles County and this whole area, and we get here as often as possible.
Well, glad you could make the trip over, especially on such a cold time of year. It's been awfully chilly lately. So what have you been up to? I'm not even sure where you want to go with discussion today. It's going to be a crazy election year, and you are up against Tim Walz again.
It's going to be a defining election year. Last time in 2014, I was on the ballot against Congressman Walz. We received 46% of the vote across this district, which is 21 counties all the way across southern Minnesota. So a big district like this, sometimes a challenger needs to run back-to-back and keep building up the name and keep getting known by the folks. And what we do is we try to get out and shake hands and let people know where we stand on the issues very clearly. And this is a defining election. This is pretty much going to be whether the voters want a third Obama term, which is what is represented with Hillary Clinton and Tim Walz, or they want big, bold change in Washington. And I think whoever the Republican candidate for president is, I'll run with that person, and that's what we'll offer the voters.
Well, I know last time around, you really had some serious momentum. You had things just growing in leaps and bounds. So, do you see that just continuing to grow?
I think so. What happens is when people get a little bit more familiar with you, that helps. But the issues are resonating even more so today, and they're pretty much the same issues than from the last campaign. When you look at what's going on around the world with the rise of ISIS and radical Islam, people are paying attention to that differently today than they did in the last election. Obamacare is something that's on people's minds. I mean, there are families out here going broke because their premiums are skyrocketing. They're spending 20, 30, 40% of their income, and it's just not affordable. And for many people, the insurance is worthless because the deductibles are so high. And then you look at other issues in the economy in general. It's very stagnant. High-wage jobs are disappearing. There's problems across the board with regulations. I just think this is a defining election in many ways, and we're going to have a very, very stark contrast between the two political parties.
Well, let's touch on some real basic issues. Just recently, President Obama came out and talked about gun control, and Congressman Walz really didn't have much to say about it other than that he was kind of looking into the issue. I don't remember what his exact quote was, but he really didn't have a whole lot to say about Obama's speech. What were your thoughts on what President Obama had to say?
Well, I didn't like it. About 2 hours after President Obama made his proclamation that he was going to effectively legislate from the White House and issue what I thought was an unlawful executive order on firearms, we put out there that, look, we need to defend the Second Amendment and people's rights to keep and bear arms. And if it's the Congress of the United States that's supposed to write our laws, not the president. So I'm completely opposed to what President Obama is up to. And, I'm very disappointed that the Congressman Walz has not come forward with a position. He says he's carefully reviewing this. I'd say, look, you either believe the Congress should write the laws or you don't, and you either believe President Obama is right or wrong on this issue, but take a position.
When it comes down to basically the last part of President Obama's presidency, sometimes people refer to it as kind of the redundant part of his 8 years. Do you think he has the time or the ability to pass something like that?
Well, unfortunately, what's happened is we have a president that's kind of gone rogue, where he's just decided he's going to take it upon himself to issue proclamations from the White House, not work it through the legislative process. Look what he's done on immigration, trying to give amnesty to 5 million or more illegal aliens who are here unlawfully, rather than go through the process. He circumvents the Congress in that way. He's done it on a number of EPA regulations that have come out against farmers and businesses, where he's shut down the coal industry, basically with regulations that the Congress never supported. That's why I'm for regulatory reform. The Congress should be in charge of writing the rules. They should be in charge of writing the laws, not the president and the executive agency bureaucrats. So, we need to get back to what works in our country, and some of that is the rule of law and following the Constitution and the process. So we need strong leaders in Washington that are going to step up against President Obama and others who would recklessly use their office against the people.
You had mentioned ISIS before, and during the last election, the last time that you were running, it wasn't quite at the crisis level, I guess I'll say, that it is now. Have your thoughts or ideas changed on what we need to do about that?
Yeah, I think in the last election what you saw was people were just starting to figure out that ISIS was becoming a huge threat globally. Now we know it's a threat in the United States. There's 1,000 ongoing FBI investigations for ISIS and other types of radical Islamic terrorists. When you look at what's happened in the Middle East, this weak foreign policy of President Obama, a foreign policy that Congressman Walz has supported 100%, it's a disaster. Effectively, Obama has lost the war in Iraq that Bush had won. And because when President Obama took over in 2008, we had a relatively stable Middle East with very pro-American or neutral actors throughout, and they've gone and destabilized Iraq and Syria. They've destabilized Egypt and Yemen, and of course Libya. Look at that war that Hillary Clinton prosecuted against Gaddafi. Has been a complete disaster. It's given us all these refugees that are infiltrating Europe, coming into the United States, causing problems. The rise of Islamic extremism, whether it's ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, it's horrible. And then, of course, the slaughter of Christians and the loss of prestige. So I think we need to get back to electing people, a president, and people in Congress that are going to give us Reagan's peace through strength policy. That means projecting out strength, standing for American values, standing for our allies. But it doesn't necessarily mean ground wars around the world. You know, look at Reagan defeated the Soviet Union and he didn't commit one troop to that effect. He supported our allies and he projected out strength and got it done. That's what we have to get back to.
So then when you start talking about immigration in general, are there any kind of ties between those two, or are you looking at two different subjects?
No, they're very well connected. I mean, the first responsibility of anyone who's going to serve in Congress, serve in Washington, D.C., the first responsibility is to defend the United States and protect the American people. And I think one of the primary ways we do that is we have to secure America's borders once and for all. That hasn't been done. We have President Obama and Congressman Walz with an open borders policy. It's a disaster. Look at the millions of people who have overstayed visas. We don't even know who they are, where they are. We're not doing anything about getting them out of our country. And now we're bringing in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. This has been what's been going on with Obama. Hundreds of thousands of people from Muslim countries that hate America. And it's catching up with us. They're not properly vetted, and that's why I've called for a complete timeout on future refugees coming to the United States until we can figure out how to deal with this, because we have a terrorist recruiting problem, an Islamic terrorist recruiting problem in Minnesota already from existing refugees. And that's not from me. That's from the president's own U.S. attorney in Minnesota who said those things. So we need to step up and start defending this country and protecting the American people.
Well, if I can play devil's advocate here for just a moment, what about when you look at the refugees themselves who just need a home and are living in these war-torn countries where they're just desperate?
Yeah, no, it's a sad deal. I'm for having safe zones over there and doing everything that we can to provide them an opportunity to live safely and hopefully get back to their country. But, you know, we want to help people around the world to help their countries be more like America. We don't necessarily want America to become more like other countries. And look, the United States has been the most generous country around the world as far as accepting immigrants and refugees. So the concept that maybe at this point, given the threat of radical Islam, given all the investigations and the problems we have, of taking a time out and trying to figure out what works for our country, you know, that's not being a bad actor around the world. That's just trying to be protective of our country at these critical times.
So you're not saying nobody's ever coming in again. You're saying it's time to just maybe stop, take a deep breath, and figure out a process.
Yeah, because, I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of people coming into the country, and President Obama's plan over the next year alone is to grant 300,000 visas to people from countries that frankly hate us in the Middle East and elsewhere. And, you know, is that the right thing to do when we see that people have been taught and have very radical attitudes and come here, sometimes as refugees, sometimes as immigrants, sometimes people on visas like the lady in San Bernardino, And, the intent is to harm us, to wreck our country, to do everything they can to project out their ideology and the superiority of their religion. And so I think we have to be honest about that, and I'm not afraid to address the issue.
All right. Again, we're talking to Jim Hagedorn, the Republican candidate for Congress in our 1st district here in Minnesota. Are there any other subjects that you wanted to hit upon today, Jim?
No, I just think in general this pretty important election where we're going to have an opportunity to decide we're going to have more government in our lives, more Washington, D.C. control. I'm for really bold reforms out there. I mean, regulatory reform, tax reform, and a lot of this is predicated upon, I think, Washington, D.C. needs to get back its authority. We have to take the power from the bureaucrats, the politicians, the interest groups, and give it back to the states and the people. Something like tax reform, that means the people should be deciding how to spend, save, invest, hold their own money, not those interest groups and those politicians that are trying to get them to spend it in certain ways in order to promote what they think is right. So the more we can get to that, the better country we're going to have, the better it's going to be for our families. And hopefully we'll get back to being able to create some high-wage jobs to help people live better lives here in southern Minnesota and elsewhere.
All right. Well, I think it's going to be a very interesting election year, and we wish you the best of luck in it. I'm sure we will talk to you again before the election.
Thanks for your time, Justine.